Matthew Wright Show, putting the world to rights. Live from Westminster. Order on Talk Radio.
This is the Matthew Wright Show on Talk Radio in partnership with Imagine Cruising. More than just a cruise. Oh, God, that sounds good. And you can find out more yourselves at imaginecruising.co.uk. I know I would say, I know, but I really, on a day like today, it would be marvellous. Bobbing around on boats. Right now, though, we're joined by Honey Langcaster-James, TV psychologist. Lovely to see you.
Hello. I feel like a BBC reporter today with these great big portable mics out on College Green. I love it. I've missed my vacation in life, Matthew. That's what it is.
Did I say Deborah Jones is still with us as well? So we're a merry little throng. In just a little while, Kevin's going to be trying to explain how 3/4 of schools judged outstanding are now in decline, which seems absolutely extraordinary. But first, I really want to get your take, Honey, on this story that's it's made quite a lot of noise this morning, or earlier this morning, and that's Robert Winston, the IVF pioneer, has demanded licence plates for cyclists after he was allegedly attacked by a female cyclist who he admonished politely for cycling on the pavement. He told her it was both illegal and dangerous, and she responded, so we're told, by repeatedly kicking him until bystanders came to his aid and she pedalled off into the sunset. Now, obviously, Winston is saying, if I had a number plate, we might be able to get some kind of justice for what she did. Now, that's the story. What I want to talk about, and Kevin had an incident like this. We're both nearly knocked over by a cyclist as we were crossing a road. And Kevin remonstrated, saying, we're crossing the road, you're supposed to give way. And this guy came back and was very menacing and threatening. He had actually pedalled over the zebra crossing to do it. Is something going on with cycling that I'm missing a trick on here? Why would a young woman attack a man of 78 years of age for doing, when he's done nothing? He's trying to raise up the problem that she's done something wrong, antisocial.
Well, I think there's probably a couple of things at play here. I think one is possibly about the age. Obviously he looks, we all know him for his amazing works, but he looks like an elderly man, and I'm wondering whether there is something in this society where we've stopped valuing our older members of society.
And to be fair, Kevin's he's on the wrong side of young, isn't he? and so maybe again the cyclist that berated him was quite a fit male in lycra. Maybe that's why he went after Kevin as well.
Well, I do think we have a problem in Britain where we devalue the older members of society quite a lot, and I think in times gone by that was quite different. We had a lot more respect for our elders. There was a lot more respect in general, actually, for observing the general rules of society.
Right. So let's have a look at that for a moment.
Yeah.
I concur that there was more respect. So why are we now less keen to adhere to the rules in particular that sort of relate to us getting along with one another? Putting your seatbelt on in the back of the car, I'm not too worried about that. I'm talking about the rules that allow us to interact.
Well, I think one thing is about accountability, and what I think he's calling for there in terms of putting registration plates on. I think there is some wisdom in that, because actually when we hold people accountable for their actions, when we say actually we can identify you, we know what and hold you responsible, people do actually change their behaviours. So it's not that they don't know these behaviours are incorrect, it's that they often feel, people who break the rules and who do awful things, they often feel they can get away with it. So I think there is something there.
And what about the cyclist? The cyclist, there you go, I've said it. In years gone by, I've heard colleagues of yours in the psychology game talk about, say, car drivers. Why do car drivers drive so badly? Why do they abuse one another? Why do they tailgate one another? And the argument I've always been told is, we sit in our cars, we are isolated from the world outside by metal and glass and plastic, and we're sitting in chairs that remind us almost of our sofas. And we feel like we're
it makes you feel a little bit invincible.
Yeah, we're in
got
our
the tank
kingdom.
around
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Now that, to me, every thread of that argument as to why car drivers behave like pigs makes perfect sense to me. What I don't understand is why, when you're extremely vulnerable, essentially, as vulnerable as a pedestrian, perhaps slightly less so, when you're on the pavement at least on a bicycle, is why someone who's essentially in a vulnerable form of transport should feel the same way.
Well, I wonder partly whether it's to do with the speed that you can reach on a bicycle,
On
and
a
also,
pavement.
well,
because we're not talking about on the road here. We're talking about
but
people
this
that
is the
pedal on
thing.
the pavement.
But this is the thing, isn't it? When you've got a bicycle, in theory, you don't have to necessarily follow the main rules, because a car has to sort of stay in line because it can't get around you. But somebody on a bicycle, in theory, they can nip down the edge, or they can just, I'll just go up on the curb and go around the corner. And so I wonder if that kind of ability to sort of slip in and out, if you like, gives them a kind of sense of invincibility. And I think there is a concern here, especially in London, where we live, where we know there are real problems with, cyclists having accidents constantly and all of that. I think there's a bit of an issue where they feel perhaps an inappropriate sense of invincibility because they're on two wheels, because they can nip down the side somewhere, and perhaps that's part of it.
Anything exploring the notion that they themselves are often victims of poor driving? It's difficult to hold them as victims if they knock over a pedestrian and then fall off themselves. But
no, I do think there's something there, though, actually, because when I think cyclists have historically felt like they've been on the defensive.
Absolutely, they've taken the rough edge of the stick, quite literally.
That's right. I mean, in psychology, we often talk about the drama triangle, which is kind of when you occupy this position of being, say, the victim or the one that's hard done by. It can be quite easily to step over into another role, which is the perpetrator, and it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle, if you like. So it can be.
I find this fascinating. I can even think of geopolitical situations that might reflect the same.
Yeah.
Why? Why do we behave like that? Why does the repressed become the repressor?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons why we do that. Often it is because, if you have been in a situation where you have genuinely been victimised or you've been at risk, then there can be a great sense of empowering strength that comes from, hang on a minute, I'm now going to be the one who's going to be in charge here. But then, if you like, that
See
can
how
sort of
you
go.
Like it.
Yes, but it can go to your head, because then, of course, you become the perpetrator and you end up on this sort of cycle of dysfunction, really. What you really want to be doing is being responsive to, what's out there in front of you. And I think we have to be careful that we don't sort of brandish all cyclists like this particular girl, because that's very unusual and awful, really awful. And I think there's probably a few things in the mix there.
I'll show you my feed of photographs that I take of people cycling on the pavement. I only normally take it when they're cycling towards me, and I have to step out of the way either into the road or something to avoid being knocked over. So if because I ride old motorbikes, some of my old motorbikes go slower than most bicycles.
Yeah.
But I'm stuck on the road, and I have to deal with the same awful car drivers that they have to deal with. But the thought that I would go on the pavement, and when you're suddenly, you now have the advantage, you're faster, you've got a metal thing that you're across, which can really hurt people.
Yeah.
The notion that you then put more vulnerable people in harm's way, to me, it's anathema.
I think that is something that, sort of psychologically people do sometimes, which is when they feel that they've been mistreated or not cared for, they almost justify their own actions in going on and sort of mistreating others. Or perhaps they just justify their cutting corners, not observing the rules, because they feel that the rules haven't particularly served them in the past.
What's the triangle thing called again?
So we often talk in terms of the drama triangle.
The drama triangle. I reckon you might be suffering from that, Kevin.
You think so?
Yeah. The repressed becomes the repressor.